Coliseum Video presents Best of Sal Bellomo, the final chapter. Sal Bellomo has brought us many joys, some pain, both emotional and physical, but we will always remember his contributions to the World Wrestling Federation. Let's now, before we show you some of his greatest moments, greatest match, because he didn't have more than one, that was much of anything, but nonetheless, we may show you a few others as well. But we'll show you the one good Sal Bellomo match. But most importantly, we will check in with Sal, live from his home. In fact, why don't we send it down to Sal Bellomo right now?
Hey, Lord Alfred, thank you very much for having me on the show again, and I'm looking forward to seeing that match. I have only vague recollections of how it went, as I was suffering from a minor concussion at the time. But, yeah, this is my final segment for you for the next foreseeable future. As it turns out, Mrs. Bellomo's sister's come a bit sick, and we're moving down to Albuquerque to take care of her goat farm. I know nothing about goats. This is going to be a fiasco, but family's family, and you got to do what you got to do. So, yeah, for the time being, this will be my final real wrestling history with Sal Bellomo, but I saved the best till last. This one's a doozy. Again, and I hate to hop on it, but I'm always ragging on Hulk Hogan. And this is another Hogan story. This is took place just before WrestleMania 3. Hogan was preparing for his big match with Andre the Giant. And as everybody knows, behind the scenes, Andre wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with if he didn't respect you. And Hogan knew that Andre kind of thought he was a bit soft, thought he was a bit of a powder puff. So he was real scared about what was going to happen in the match. He goes to Vince. He goes, "Look, I got to smooth things over with Andre. We got to make it. We got to make this work." And Vince says, "You know, Andre really loves to go out. He loves to drink. You go out with Andre. You keep up with him with the booze, and you know, you guys are going to be best of friends. You're going to have no trouble." So Hogan goes, "Yeah, okay, whatever," and goes out. So Vince arranges for the two of them to go out. He gets a limo. He gets some bodyguards to go out there to keep the fans back. And they go out to some dive somewhere. I don't know where it was. Andre sits down, and, before he's even in his seat, he's got 14 beers down already. They just keep coming. And poor Hogan, he's trying to keep up. He's pouring some of it under the table, pouring some of it into the flower pots. But regardless, even with what he is taking in, he's starting to get pretty sick, right? What he's holding in, he doesn't want Andre to know that he's sick. So Andre gets up to use the, what do we call them, the facilities. And Andre goes in, and it's just a regular bar, right? So it's just a bunch of stalls. It ain't made for no giant. So Andre goes in and kind of tries to force himself into this bathroom stall. And as it turns out, he's able to just barely get his keister on the toilet so he can, take a dump. And he can get his keister in, but his shoulders is too wide. So he's got to turn his body kind of halfway. So he's kind of facing almost behind him, wedged in at a weird angle, and trying to use the facilities. Well, at this point back at the table, Hogan's kind of had enough. I mean, he's about 4 times past his limit. So he realizes he's going to heave, and he figures this is the time to do it with Andre away from the table. So he goes running into the men's room, goes and runs to the very first stall, and its door's locked. Somebody's in there. Runs to the second stall, door's locked. Somebody's in there. Runs to the third stall, door's locked. Runs to the third. He sees it's open a crack, and he can't hold the puke back at this point, so he just throws the door open and vomits. Unfortunately, he vomits right into the naked crotch of Andre the Giant, who's sitting on the toilet. Andre, of course, howls, and, in the guy's voice, the whole house is shaking, but Andre can't turn around to see who done it, because he's kind of wedged in at this weird angle, and he's trying to yank his head around to see who it is. Hogan panics and starts punching Andre in the side of the head as hard as he can to keep him from turning around. So there's poor Andre, just having taken a really uncomfortable dump. Suddenly a guy pukes on his genitals and then starts punching him in the head. Hogan freaks out, runs back to the table. By the time Andre gets there, he's gone. He's got the He's got the bodyguards covering for him. They come back and Andre comes storming out of the bathroom. Of course, his pants are covered in vomit, and he's pretty much an angry giant. Wants to know where Hogan is. He says they got the call from Vince. Hogan had to go down to a children's hospital. Andre says some guy barfed all over my junk and punched me in the head. And under orders from Hogan, the bodyguards telling me that it was Adrian Adonis. So poor old Adrian, who was, one of the greatest guys around at that time, takes a fall. And I never really found out what happened behind the scenes. On Adrian, of course, denies it. He has no idea. And Hogan ain't going to let nobody rat him out because he's paying everybody off right and left. The end of the story here is Andre never finds out. And shortly after WrestleMania 3, Adrian Adonis is gone from WWE, all based around this crazy fiasco. Once again, Hogan, that rat bastard, he played him for a fool. And that's still one of my favorite real wrestling history stories. I want to tell you how much I loved being here, and I'm gonna go back through my archives and find a few more stories for the day when I inevitably return. But I do hope you've enjoyed your time with me as much as I've enjoyed my time with you. Thank you, Lord Alfred.
Good night, Sal, and God bless.
How's it going, brother?
I'm good, baby. What's happening with you?
Not so much. The road to WrestleMania this year, it's like those roads when you're driving in the country. You're driving around, you got the top down, you got the, John McDermott on the stereo, and you see one of those signs that says, this road is unmaintained, enter at your own risk.
Good Lord, could you have had a better analogy of where we're headed into WrestleMania?
Well, especially the fact that, John McDermott, it's one of the songs for WrestleMania, like the big song, so.
Oh, my Lord. But no, it really is true, because at the end of that unmaintained road, there may be something half decent. But boy, it's not, it's a pretty shaky, rocky, unpromising looking road going in, isn't it? I mean, I felt underwhelmed. The prospect of where some of these matches I think will be good. I'm excited about Ambrose and Lesnar and all that. But yeah, the overall feeling, well, we'll get into that, because I think that's going to be kind of an overarching theme of what we're dealing with in this whole podcast, although we do have some other news items. But yeah, I don't know. Like, what are you excited about going in? Is there anything you're excited about going in?
Well, we can break it down. We can get down to brass tacks. Just want to welcome everyone again to Vintage Update. Another great intro. We're going to miss Sal Bellomo, but it's been a good run. And again, maybe we'll have a return, a comeback. Don't call it a comeback. He's been here for years. And this is Vintage Update. Shotgun Shan, Luke Force in the house. And if you're listening to us on the Spreaker Web Radio Network, or on Facebook, or on YouTube, or on Twitter, we're all over the place right now. But definitely want to encourage you to check out our website at WrestlingAudioRevolution.com. Now, do you want to just jump right into the WrestleMania talk and the way things have been shaping up here?
Well, I think we've got kind of a roundabout way of going through all this. One thing that's come to light in the past week that I think is certainly worth discussing is the Kevin Owens ladder match. A lot of people had hoped that it was going to be Owens and Sami Zayn in a one-on-one. I know I certainly did. I think there's a lot of story already built into that. But instead, they've opted for the Mania ladder match. And I can't, based on what we saw last year, I can't say that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's guaranteed to be a highlight of the night. Whether it's match of the night, I don't know. But it's kind of interesting booking. You have Kevin Owens defending his title against Sami Zayn, Dolph Ziggler, Stardust, Sin Cara, Zack Ryder, and The Miz. Okay, I know. If you were to kind of look at this, you kind of say there's a few things here that are wrong. Actually, there's more things that are right with it than are wrong with it. But I kind of wonder, man, are we supposed to look at this knowing at least, okay, from my point of view, where I'm always saying we need to make new guys, we need to freshen up the mix. Am I supposed to look at this and feel let down, or am I supposed to look at this and go, well, Zack Ryder's getting a Mania match. Sin Cara is getting a Mania match. Realistically, if you're going to do one of these multi-man ladder matches and not duplicate what you've done in the past couple of years in the Money in the Banks and the Mania ladder matches, maybe this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Does it kill the match, or does it elevate somebody? What do you think?
It's kind of a loaded question you're hitting me with there. This is what I feel, and again, it's not anything against any of these guys, but I do feel very bad for Kevin Owens, and I do feel very bad for Sami Zayn that this is what they think of them. Of course, there's injuries, there's other things, there's other programs that are taking guys out of this match, but at the end of the day, you hold a title where, for whatever reason, Zack Ryder is a contender to it. Sin Cara is a contender to it. With no build, these guys are still just the same old jabronis. Maybe had a week or two where they're getting treated maybe a little bit better. To me, it brings the entire match down. It brings the entire, maybe not the match down. Maybe that's not the right way to put it. It definitely brings the title down. To me.
It brings the title down ahead of time, yeah. But what if these guys put on one hell of a match? What if Ryder comes out of this and Sin Cara come out of this as elevated players? I'm not saying it's going to happen. You're right.
That doesn't happen, though. The thing is, that doesn't happen in these matches. This is just a stunt match. It's going to be exciting. It'll be fun. Like you say, probably be one of the highlights. But I mean, none of these guys are going to be higher on the card because they put on a great match in this big spectacular stunt show. They're going to be treated, and they're going to get their WrestleMania moment. So in that sense, it's good for them that maybe we'll have a WrestleMania moment that we think back on that involves Zack Ryder, right? I mean, that's good for him. But elevated, actually getting anything other than one night of I guess you'd say shine and getting to have some spots and some high spots. All these guys are going to kill themselves. They're all going to work hard. But do you know what I mean? It's like, how many did we see Shelton in near the end there?
Oh, I agree.
And he would be the star of the match. Like, he would be the guy with the spot, or even Kofi, you know. And it's not like the next night or even the next week or anything that these guys were any better off necessarily, except that they got that exposure. So that's all this really. That's the way I look at it anyway. What do you think?
I don't disagree with you, but here's what I'm saying. When you're building WrestleMania, you're seeing how many guys are out. And they've pulled these guys in and said, we're going to put you in a title match. I agree that the chances are that they have no long-term plans for these guys. But on the other hand, for a guy like Zack Ryder, for a guy like Sin Cara, to at least be in WrestleMania, when I say that they'll be elevated, I do not mean that they're going to be main event guys or even upper mid card, but at least a step up and to be circulating in a different group of guys. Like, I seriously think at least Sin Cara and Zack Ryder will be circulating in a different crowd after WrestleMania than they are now. I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to hold any titles or they're going to be in any main events. But I still think I see it as a good thing. That's just me, and I've kind of painted myself into a corner because I complain about the lack of depth, and I complain about the guys who aren't getting their push and the guys who kill themselves.
Right, the lack of opportunity.
Yeah, the lack of opportunity. So for me, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't say that this was good. I'm fine with it. I mean, I certainly wish that Sami Zayn had a bigger match, and that Kevin Owens had a bigger match. But then again, looking at WrestleMania and seeing that they said, we got to have one of those ladder matches in here because we're really short this year. Making it for Owens' title wasn't necessarily a bad idea. And again, I don't know who else you would have put in here that wouldn't have just been boring repetition. So I'm going to say it's a good thing. I'm not going to say it's going to work, and I'm not going to say anyone's going to be any better off. I think it's really designed to be a slow build for Owens and Zayn, but good for Sin Cara, good for Zack Ryder. Miz and Stardust, I think, are going to be in the same place they always were. I'm glad to see Cody on the card. And Ziggler,
he's a great guy to put in that match. He's going to do some great things, of course. Yeah.
So I am, like I said, I'm painted into a corner where I have to say that this is all right. I certainly wish that it was a bigger match for Owens and Zayn, but I'm happy for the other guys that have gotten an opportunity.
Sure, I'm happy for the guys. That's right, I'm happy for the guys. But it's just thrown together. It's just thrown together.
It is thrown together, although I didn't mind the way it was thrown together. I didn't mind that it was thrown together because Owens held this triple threat with a bunch of guys that he considered beneath him so that only one of those guys would get the title shot at Mania. And then they turned it around and made those three guys contenders in the ladder match. Like, to me, that was kind of interesting. I didn't mind it. It was kind of turning back on him. And I certainly hope that they'll take advantage of that by having those three guys have their moment with Owens in the match where they kind of prove themselves a little bit. Not that that's necessarily going to happen, but I'd certainly like to see that. So, I'm all right with it. Let's just see where it goes. I mean, I'm happy for the guys, and I'm actually happy as a fan to see those guys. Owens and Zayn take a little bit of a step down for the match, but then again, it could be a hell of a match, and it could focus mostly on Owens and Zayn. So who knows?
Oh, I would think it is. They're the stars of that match. And The Miz. I mean, The Miz gets a lot of TV time too. Yeah. So, I mean, it'll be a stunt show. It'll be exciting. It'll have things that you probably remember when all is said and done. And like I say, if you're Zack Ryder, it's probably the best you can hope for right now is that there's going to be some WrestleMania moment that people think of that involves your face. You know what I mean? Sin Cara, I mean, I think he'll do some good stuff too. Obviously Neville was supposed to be in this match.
Of course, yeah.
He's not obviously going to be ready anytime too soon. Have you heard much about what the deal is with him? How long's he out?
I don't know. I
No
can't
surgery,
remember.
I know. No surgery required.
No surgery, but I would be shocked. I mean, anything that I read said he was going to miss Mania. But then again...
Oh, yeah. I just didn't know how long, if you knew how long.
No, I have no idea. I have no idea how long.
I had heard 3 months. We'll have to check
Yeah.
up on that
Yeah.
with
I don't.
Mr. Neville.
I don't know if there's been any updates on that. But yeah, it is sad to see Neville not in because that really would have changed the complexion of this match entirely. But I guess we'll see where it goes. Another thing that happened this week was the whole notion now brought about by Vince McMahon that if Undertaker can't beat Shane, that this will be his very last WrestleMania. Normally that would be an empty threat, but we know that Taker's near the end. Do you think that there is any legitimate chance that the Undertaker's final opponent will be Shane McMahon? Or, see, the way it was worded is I wasn't sure if that meant he could never compete at WrestleMania again or that Taker had to retire. So, I mean, let's just say that it's retirement. If the whole deal here is that Taker has to retire if he doesn't win the match, do you really seriously see it being Shane McMahon that retires him?
I think there's no legitimate chance that he won't lose to Shane McMahon at WrestleMania.
Well, I would hope.
Because I just don't see any way. First of all, I don't think Undertaker's going to turn heel. I don't think it's going to be revealed at WrestleMania that he's actually Vince's henchman and now he's going to be super heel alongside Vince. I don't see that happening, so I'm ruling that one out. And that's really the only other thing you can do because it's a weird, listen, this is a weird WrestleMania and a weird match, which will probably be going last. And, I mean, everything about it is weird because here's Shane back. And I talked about this a few weeks ago, probably on the last Vintage Update, I think is when we talked about the return of Shane. And it was like the thing that Shane has that none of the other McMahons have, and it really works, is the fact that people like Shane. I just don't see any way that unless, except for Undertaker actually turning and being Vince's henchman, where the end of WrestleMania is going to be like, well, we talked about all the things that were wrong about this product on TV. We talked about all the things, the reason this product sucks, why the ratings are in the toilet, why the stock is down, why the wrong guys are getting pushed and the guys with talent aren't getting pushed. All of this was said on TV. How do you, at the end of that match, say, well, like I just don't see any way that the story isn't told that, okay, well, we're getting a change because they've just been shining the light on all the things that are wrong with the product. Of course, Vince is still the boss. It's not going to be any real change from a storyline perspective, it will. And how do you have Undertaker win and then say at the end of it, okay, well, nothing's going to change after all and you're still going to get the same old shitty product?
So what I'm wondering is Taker,
how?
Well, yeah, and that is Taker ready to go? And will they play it that this is his last Mania and he'll somehow get one more match out for SummerSlam or something and beat somebody of significance in that final match to kind of get back at Vince? I don't know, or do I don't think a Taker Vince match would be wise, but you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm kind of wondering if that, I mean, I agree with you. I don't see any way that Taker doesn't lose at Mania. But again, like, I don't know, it just seems so absurd to have Shane be the guy to retire him or whatever they decide to do, if they even go ahead with it. We know we've seen a lot of fake retirements, but with a guy that's this close to the end, it seems kind of stupid to do a fake retirement. So
yeah, and you know what, too? I think that you bring up a good point. I mean, they didn't say that it was going to be his last match. They said it would be his last WrestleMania.
Yeah.
But going out in Texas in front of all of those people, I just think that, you know, traditionally you think of it like, well, his last match is going to be with Shane. Like, that's not a good way to go out for his last match for a guy that had so many great ones and a lot of them at WrestleMania. But I think it's not that philosophy. I don't think the match is really what it's about. I think that Taker's career is going to end in more of a big poetic moment, a storyline moment. But he's just going to kind of analyze the whole situation of what's happening, that he's being used to keep these assholes in power. And I think he's going to sacrifice his own career. And that's going to be the story, that he ended his career to further change, if you know what I mean, in the company.
Yeah.
And I do think that's the story that is going to be told, because I just don't see any way that Shane beats him clean. Like I said, it's such a weird build because people love Shane, but now he's in there with The Undertaker. And people love The Undertaker. And it's, you know, it's like, well, we don't want Shane to end The Undertaker's career. So it's just such a strange dynamic, because how do you get excited for Shane and get behind Shane and, oh yeah, we're going to bring change when it's at, you know, the expense of Undertaker's career?
It is strange. It is a very, very weird thing to be doing at this point. But then again, the whole WrestleMania is weird. You've got Triple H against a guy they've been desperately trying to push down the fans' throats that isn't working. You've got sort of a sprinkling. Well, we'll get into some of the other stuff. We've got a sprinkling of good and bad throughout the whole card. And it really does seem like if there was ever a WrestleMania where it looked like they were flailing, this is it.
Oh yeah.
It really seems like, they're trying to keep their heads from going under here, and they got nothing because they really weren't planning. They didn't have enough guys to step in as big name guys, and it's coming back on them now. So I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see there's any way that Taker doesn't lose. But at the same time, it just feels so strange. So I think, yeah, you're right. There's going to have to be some kind of funky thing that'll happen near the end that'll maybe somehow bring some poignancy to it and have Taker. I mean, I guess Taker retires, and he's certainly earned it. You know what I mean?
And then he can say, he went out on his own terms and he wasn't anybody's puppet or whatever. But I do think this is a point where we kind of have to also talk about some of the other news that's been coming out that's been waving some red flags, you could say. Have you been up to date over the last few days with some of the stuff that's been coming out regarding separate marketing for SmackDown and Raw? Some new figures that are coming out that seem to have the SmackDown brand on them, others that have the Raw brand. I think there was also some kind of USA preview thing that was coming out for the next few months, and it had something where it seemed to be positioning Raw and SmackDown as two different shows, and it's definitely the talk is out there that there may be, because again, Shane is not gaining control of WWE, he's gaining control of Raw, and I feel as though that was probably done for a reason. And as I say, there seems to be some marketing stuff that's been leaking out that would indicate that there's going to be two separate brands again, or something along those lines. I know you said a few weeks ago you're not necessarily a big fan of it. Is there any way they can do something like this and have it work for you?
The way that it works for me is I don't want to see them split the brand as far as split the roster. Splitting the brand I'm okay with, and I'll get into that in a minute, but splitting the roster doesn't work for me because they still rely heavily on too many guys. And as much as, I think I said this before, but as much as it seems like, oh boy, someone else is going to get a shot now that they're splitting the brands, I still don't see that happening. I think they'll take certain guys and make them the bulk of the broadcast on both shows. You'll still be seeing just as much of the same old guys, unless the philosophy's changed. You'll just be seeing them on different shows. What would work for me is if they really create a feud between management on the two shows where there is no exclusivity to superstars, but more that they're trying to outdo each other every week and creating real legitimate competition between the two sets of management on these two shows, so that you're not getting any more of these, oh, it's SmackDown, so it's going to be like these two random dudes against these two random dudes, right, which is what you usually get. But they're really starting to push big main events and big storylines that go from one that carry week to week on these individual brands. I'd be okay with that, but I don't think that a split roster is going to work any better than it did before. But that's just me. I mean, let's let it play out, because they may have bigger ideas. Shane may take all the guys that really need to be pushed and take them to Raw and make them all big stars. I mean, who knows? I certainly wouldn't be able to complain if that happened.
Mm-hmm. I know it's hard to know where they're going to go with this, but again, a lot of advertising has been coming out lately that would definitely seem to indicate that there's going to be two separate brands again. And I don't mind your idea at all, especially if they're trying to outdo each other with the shows that they're putting on. You do risk burning out everything, but that's already happening in WWE, so who cares? Which brings us to our next match, AJ Styles versus Chris Jericho.
What do you think about this? I mean, is this too much of a good thing? I'm not saying that AJ and Jericho can't put on a great show, but AJ's already won 2 out of 3, so does he go 3 out of 4? Do we go flat with Jericho beating AJ and we have to keep dragging this out? I mean, I would love to have seen AJ fight somebody different, and that's not because I don't think this will be a good match, but they've kind of insta-feuded this in that they've had them fight so many times over a short period of time to make it seem like a real legitimate hardcore feud, that I kind of feel like I've seen it. What do you think?
First of all, I need to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What was going on Monday with that? They had AJ against Kevin Owens last week on SmackDown. They did the whole finish of AJ gets distracted like an idiot by music and ends up getting beat by Kevin Owens. And then they repeat pretty much the exact same finish on Monday, where AJ Styles gets distracted by music. He gets distracted by Jericho on the ramp. You'd think that this guy, after being in New Japan for all these years, would know how to be a professional and just like, don't worry. And I just want to tell these guys this. I want to scream this at the TV sometimes. It's like, don't worry about any of that until they're in the ring.
Yeah,
if they're in the ring and they're coming at you, watch your back. Make sure that they're not jumping you. But even if they jump you, you're going to win the match. So just keep your eyes on your opponent. Keep your eyes on the road. That's all I'm going to say.
But that's the logic that we're supposed to forget about.
Right.
Really.
Isn't it funny, though? But isn't it funny, Shan, that they didn't forget about it with Jericho? He's the heel. He's in there with Fandango, who they decide this week that they need to mention that, oh, yeah, he beat Chris Jericho, and then totally just mock it and make a joke out of it, which, by the way, really is just making a joke of your own product because you're the idiots that booked that. So I thought that was kind of weird. And especially when Fandango, like, that guy delivered. You know, I'm sorry. He delivered. He lived up to his end of the bargain. I don't know what happened with that push. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I agree. I was just going to agree with you. That's all. Keep going, though, because I like where you're headed.
I just thought it was really funny that AJ 2 matches in a row with the same opponent ends up being a fool and getting, losing a match, which, by the way, he's lost like twice in 1 week. I don't like that at all. Just chipping away, just chipping away at that main event luster. And then Chris Jericho comes in there, and you'd think that they would at least do the same thing for him, where he gets distracted and he's looking up at the ramp and he ends up, having an upset loss to Fandango. Oh no, because Chris Jericho knows you got to keep your eye on your opponent. He ends up being able to overcome that and hit him with the Codebreaker 1, 2, 3. Shouldn't that have been reversed? What exactly are we trying to do here with AJ Styles?
Let's look between that and the constant mentions and criticisms of AJ's hair. I'm not entirely sure what they're doing. I mean, honestly, the number of times they've talked about AJ's hair, which, like, I'm not necessarily a fan of it, but it gives him a distinctive look, which is something he was lacking beforehand. Even my wife, who's not an AJ Styles fan, said, "Wow, he looks a lot better." So, I mean, he did something. I don't know. I don't understand. I always get nervous when you start seeing the big guys from outside of the company come in and they start taking little shots at them. So I don't know, but I agree with you. It was really silly. I hated that. I hated all the AJ Styles and what was he? I mean, the guys, unfortunately, they always sound tone deaf and it sounds awful. What was it that AJ was calling out to Jericho? I can't even remember now, but it sounded terrible too. And I was like,
and the fans didn't get behind it at all either.
No, I know. And that's like when it lays flat like that, you just gotta feel terrible for them.
No, the hair thing is it's a big thing. People that maybe don't follow the product or don't follow WWE or the way things seem to go with that company, they may think, oh, you're just nitpicking and talking about the hair. But when you can tell that the commentators are constantly bringing up the hair, that is bad. That means Vince McMahon doesn't like AJ Styles' hair. And he's obsessed with his hair. The funny thing is the guy that started all this was Kevin Owens on Twitter. And I don't know if Kevin Owens, God bless the guy, I love him as a wrestler, and I like the guy, but I don't know if he's ever looked in the mirror. He's got a freaking dry spike. So I didn't really understand why he was on Twitter bringing all this attention to AJ's hair. And it seems like ever since that, the commentators are also onto it, and now everybody's onto it. And it's like, oh, AJ's hair. I've been watching this guy for 2 years in New Japan. I've never once thought about his hair.
Me either.
Never. I just thought this guy's the man. And he's still the man. And you watch him on pretty much every show he's on now, especially now that he's adapted to the ring and the WWE style and everything. That guy's the best wrestler on your television right now. No question about it. And especially in WWE, like that guy is the best wrestler you are seeing on a weekly basis. Not even a question to me. So it's really a shame to see what's going on. What's going to happen in the match? Again, like you say, I thought the feud was done. I thought they'd already had the rubber match, and AJ won that feud. So I worry about that, and I worry that he's going to lose, but I still think we'll have a great match.
Is this still, again, another symptom of a thin roster? I mean, do you think maybe they looked and said, do you think maybe this isn't necessarily a bad thing for AJ, that they looked and said, we don't want to throw him into a feud with a big guy and waste it when we can pull it out a little later. We need him to be in a decent match with an opponent that can make him look as good as he actually is. Put him with Jericho. I don't know. I mean, in that way, I'm okay with it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're right. He's been given a pretty decent spot for how long he's been there, and his opponent is a pretty high level opponent and a high level wrestler, and the match will be great.
And he's
all
a
the
special
other
attraction,
stuff, though. But it's all the other stuff that has me very, very concerned, because this guy has come in. He's been, like we all talked about it, how over or how much recognition will he really have when he comes into WWE? That was the question. Yeah. And what did we see? Not only did we see the Royal Rumble and the way that whole thing went down seamlessly, and he was by far the most popular wrestler in that match, but he's been the most over guy on all the house shows that he's on. His merchandise is selling off the racks. But again, do you hear anybody talking about Roman Reigns' greasy ass hair? You don't. And you're not going to. You're not ever going to. Are you going to hear anyone talk about how John Cena looks like he's wearing a box of Quaker Oats on his head? No, because they're not going to bring attention to that. The fact that they're bringing attention to AJ, it's bad. It's bad. In terms of him being what he could be and should be, which is one of your top guys. And I mean, for God's sakes, I thought when he came in, they could have just put him right up at the top mix, right there alongside Roman Reigns, and it would have been a completely accepted push. The fans wouldn't have, there would have been no backlash on that at all. And it just seems like they've got their idea of AJ Styles, and it's a shame, but who knows? We'll see where it goes in WrestleMania. Let's hope he gets a W there, because I think that's a big moment for him, and it's gonna be cool seeing him at a WrestleMania. I'll say that much.
I think it will be too, and I think maybe they may just be trying to cool him a little bit. This may just be sour grapes that the fans are so into him, and he had nothing to do. WWE had nothing to do. WD-40 had nothing to do with building him, and now he's taken a big step. So this may just be a little bit of cooling.
Oh, look at his hair! Looks like a dead cat on his head.
I mean, at least they're not talking about him not being big enough. So maybe that's a blessing. He can cut his hair when they decide. We got a couple of news items before we get into a couple of meaty discussions near the end of the show here. A couple of quick news items. One of them, very high profile, the Hogan-Gawker lawsuit. Now, how much did Hulk end up getting out of this? I know it's going to appeals, but what was the grand total by the time he got all of his money?
Let's see. He got $125 million.
Yeah.
And then he got an additional $25 million for punitive. So, yeah, a lot of money.
How much do you think he'll actually see? Because I'm assuming Gawker's not going to be able to pay him, $150 million and still continue. So what do you think after, if they do go for bankruptcy, what do you think he's going to get?
Which I do. I absolutely think this is going to be going to bankruptcy. I think he's going to be chasing that money for a long time. You can't take blood from a stone. And this Gawker made a lot of big mistakes. I mean, they really put their entire business in danger. It's the whole thing is in jeopardy now because of this. And as far as how much Hogan is going to end up getting, I think more like, if he gets that $25 million, he'll be lucky. Because I don't really, I think it's going to be a real nightmare in terms of him getting that money. That's all I'm going to say about that. But it is pretty weird, this guy. I mean, he's got a horseshoe up his ass. He's got something. The way that this guy is able to bounce back and actually, at least what he's been awarded, I mean, more money than he's ever made in his life. This guy, if he did get paid all that, God, he'd have more money than he ever had even in his prime. Yeah. So it's just crazy that he goes from having that racist rant, his career being ruined, fired from WWE, and now here he is. So all because of a sex tape with Bubba the Love Sponge's wife.
Jesus. Do you think what do you think the chances are that he comes back? Because this, regardless of the fact that he's won his lawsuit, the fact that what it's based around, I still wonder if it's going to be. I mean, WWE can't afford to distance themselves or to upset the sponsors. So I mean, what do you think?
Right, and the vibe has already changed with Hogan, it seems like, in the mainstream. He's been on all the talk shows. He was on Good Morning America. It just seems like already the ice is starting to melt, and the horrible things he said in this video are going to be forgotten, or not forgotten, but at least forgiven. And, again, like I said last week, I mean, once it's good with the sponsors, once they have no worries of sponsors pulling out, of course they're going to bring them back. There's money to be made with Hulk Hogan, from a merchandising standpoint, from whatever you want to do in terms of branding Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania. There's money to be made, and they're going to want to make that money and be in on that deal. But, who knows? Maybe Hogan will get all the money and maybe you'll buy TNA. Who knows?
Oh, no. Oh, God.
I think Hulkster's a little smarter than that, though.
I don't think he's a little smarter. I think someone will talk him out of it. Maybe his only his only half-sane friend, Jimmy Hart, will tell him it's not a good idea. Look, we got another news item here that's absolutely just breaking right now, and it says Brie Bella will be retiring this Monday night on Raw due to a health issue with her husband and former WWE star Daniel Bryan. And it doesn't say what the health issue is, but that Brie will be retiring in order to help him. Have you heard anything about this? I just read about it just recently.
Ooh, that's no good, because Daniel Bryan has been pulled. This was a few days ago, maybe 2 days ago that this came out. Like, he's been pulled from everything. They had him during WrestleMania week, WrestleMania weekend, all the Access stuff. He had the Daniel Bryan appreciation night, an entire night dedicated to him. That was going to be at Madison Square Garden, I believe, and they've had to cancel that. So he's been pulled from everything. Definitely a lot of eyebrows are raising over this. I don't have anything to offer regarding what's going on, but the fact that they're saying she's going to be retiring on Raw due to a health issue with him, one that we don't already know about, I mean...
It has to be something serious, and that makes me feel queasy, you know?
I certainly hope it's not an angle.
Well, I hope it's not an angle, too. I hope
Lana doesn't come out in her stonewashed jean skirt.
Oh my God! How can she be back to that again? It just drives me crazy. but yes, that didn't even occur to me until you said it. Boy, that would be sickening. But my heart just dropped when I heard about this, because the first thing I could think was, oh God, what's happened to Bryan? So yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to follow that. I guess we'll find out on Monday. We'll be able to tell on Monday whether it's legit or whether it's just an angle. So.
Well, the more, again, like you say, this is breaking right now, and we're kind of just digesting this. But now that I'm thinking about it for a few minutes, I mean, they're not pulling Daniel Bryan from everything WrestleMania weekend for some storyline with Brie Bella.
Yeah.
You know, that's legit. And the last thing this guy needs is more bad luck or bad news. So we're going to send, our thoughts and prayers out to Daniel Bryan and Brie Bella. And, this is a little bit alarming, but we'll just hope for the best and hope it's not as serious as it sounds, but it doesn't sound good. I'll be honest.
Yeah, well, the other thought I had right away is that thank goodness they didn't clear him if it's something that could be affecting him now to this extent. There's a lot of bad feelings, at least on my side, when he wasn't getting cleared before we found out the extent of his injuries. Now it turns out it could be just as serious as people feared. So, best wishes to Daniel and Brie. And I certainly hope that this turns out to be something manageable. We got another little bit of news here, and this is just a little kind of buried interview that I was reading the other day. Crime Time. JTG and Shad Gaspard were on interviewed by Sports Illustrated, and normally I wouldn't really care if they were interviewed, but I read it, and they actually said a couple things that really resonated with me, things that made a lot of sense, and I'm just going to read it to you right now. This is just a quote, and Gaspard said, and it says, "I love the WWE. It's my family, but the goal now isn't to have a great product. The goal is to have a controlled product. What's going on right now isn't what made us successful. We were willing to step out of the boundaries and be different. Edge, Christian, Rock, Stone Cold, and Triple H himself, everything those guys did stepped out of bounds. Now guys are so scared of the heat that they're not willing to step out of bounds, and we were. I love NXT. I see the enthusiasm put into NXT, not put into Raw and SmackDown, because they assume people will just watch. But fans are starting to leave. As much as I love kid fans, they're not the ones who push the product. Fans between 10 and 27 push the product. And those are the guys who say, hell yeah, they are the ones who push the product more than anyone, and they are the ones who need their intelligence challenged. Kind of interesting statement that they're putting out there. And it's not like it's all news. It's not like it's something that hasn't occurred to us before, but it is nice to see it presented by somebody within the industry.
Absolutely. This all started, if there's one guy you can really point at and say, this is the guy that changed everything, and this is the guy that brought us to where we are now, and this is the guy we can point our finger at and blame, it's Ric Flair, because there was that one night where he flipped out in one of his promos, he punched himself in the head, he started bleeding, he was like, what was that? No, that was in TNA when he was throwing blood into the crowd. But it was something almost to that level of him just bleeding all over the place. He said, what was the line? I've made more virgins bleed in my life or something like that. He went completely nuts in one of his promos and said things that just shouldn't be said in this day and age on television. And that was it. Vince flipped out and everything changed after that. They were already doing the scripting and stuff like that, but it wasn't like it is now, where it's like you're going to learn this word for word. if you have things you want to add, don't even bother. Just learn what's on the script. And it's like we got a million writers because these guys can't possibly talk for themselves. They can't be trusted. It all changed after that. And regarding NXT, of course, you watch that show. It's about to get a lot more fun, too. That's the thing. Because you got Anderson and Gallows that are going to be coming in. And they're going to have, their buddies there. They're going to have Matt Bloom there. They're going to have Finn Balor there. You've got Shinsuke Nakamura, who's very close with both Carl Anderson and Matt Bloom and Finn Balor. It's going to be a great environment to work in. And you can tell when you watch that show that those guys are having a ton of fun. And that really does resonate. And you really do feel that through the camera when people are enjoying what they do and the environment seems to be like a healthy one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the NXT guys, and I don't know everything that goes on behind the scenes, but I do feel like the NXT guys have a lot more freedom than the main roster guys do.
Of course.
As far as because they're supposed to be crafting those characters. And there isn't somebody sitting right there terrified of what the sponsors will think, and they're just kind of letting them do their thing. Obviously, they've got guidelines, and I'm sure these guys want to toe the line. But still, you get the feeling that they're putting so much of themselves into it that it can't help but help them. You know what I mean? I feel like on the main roster right now, because the business has been in a slow decline, that now there is so much focus on sponsor money that they can't really take any chances anymore. They're so frightened all the time about something happening. Again, obviously the Flair thing. And we've seen a few other things happen too that's got out of control. May have set off those buzzers, but I think really now there is just such a desperation and a focus on keeping the sponsors happy and bringing in new sponsors and not losing any sponsors that it's obviously really crippled them creatively.
Right. Even The Rock, recently, he was one of the few guys that it seemed like he could just kind of come back whenever he wanted and pretty much do and say whatever he wanted. But that last time he came back when he interviewed the guys at ringside, Hogan and Savage lookalikes, Vince was losing his mind over that stuff. And with NXT, it's just like you say, it's a lot more freedom, a lot more fun. And this isn't just the wrestling. This is the commentary. Like Corey Graves, to me, that guy's probably the best WWE commentator, right up, not as good as Morrow, but again, different role, a heel commentator. But Morrow and Corey Graves, could you imagine that team?
It would be fantastic. Yeah, you're right. Corey Graves has come. I was kind of had one eyebrow raised when I first heard that he was moving into commentary, but I certainly take it all back now. He's really entertaining to listen to. He's really such a smart heel commentator. He's kind of like the old Jesse, Bobby Heenan type.
Exactly.
Heel commentators, that he actually has something to say, not like a Jerry Lawler. Again, I hate to always harp on Jerry Lawler, but the guy has nothing to say. But he really is he's an intelligent counterpoint to what you're being fed by the main, face or, neutral commentator. And I love that about him.
But you can tell when you watch that show that those commentators are not having somebody yelling in their ear, telling them word for word what they need to say. They've got more freedom to let the stories breathe, and they can pretty much reference whatever they like other than TNA wrestling. Exactly. That seems to be the one thing you can't mention on WWE TV, and why at this point they're worried about that, I don't know. It was funny in that Table for Three when Joe was talking about, he's like, oh, I was in Ring of Honor and I was in 0-1 and then I was around for a little while, and then I came to WWE. He worded it some funny way where he just kind of said, yeah, and then it's like the majority of his career he was in TNA. But anyway, NXT, did you happen to see any of it before we get on with some things? Can we talk just quickly about NXT for a minute?
Are we talking about the Rich Swann and Finn Balor match?
Like I said, guys are having fun, and it really shows. And Rich Swann, I know this was not his debut, but God, man, what a showing that guy made for himself in a match with Finn Balor. Only a 5-minute match, but when it was time for Rich to get his stuff in, it was just awesome. And he hit everything so well. Rich Swann, dripping, oozing charisma when he came out and was dancing, and he comes out to the nice little electro disco song. The fans sing Lionel Richie when he wrestles. This guy is absolutely entertaining, no question about it. And it's kind of funny to see him now in WWE because I'm used to seeing him mostly in PWG, where he did the tag team with Ricochet, and they were kind of like this breakdance duo and everything, and they do breakdance routines, and they challenge their opponents to battles and stuff like that. But goddamn, Rich Swann looked awesome. Finn Balor is just a great champion. He can really have a match with anybody. But I was very impressed with, how much he was willing to give Rich Swann in that match, and the offense again looked incredible.
Yeah, it was the generosity you could see out of Balor, really wanting to
for a brand new guy,
for a brand new guy, and to give that guy some footing on the roster. You know what I mean? It's only good for Finn down the road that he has somebody credible to fight, so it doesn't end up like the main roster. So good for Finn, and good for everybody involved in the match. It was a really good TV match.
Exactly, and in 5 minutes, you saw this new guy, and you're like, I can't wait to see this guy wrestle again.
Exactly. And it left the door open for those two to have a bigger program down the road. And that's really what you want to do in one of these kind of matches.
Yeah, definitely. And all kinds of great stuff has been happening on NXT. I mean, American Alpha are incredible. They've really been doing a great job. Although I'm not sure about the Steiner singlets. I don't think that the Steiner brothers singlets really suit them very much. I thought the way that they looked before was a lot better. That's just my personal taste. I thought that the Kurt Angle singlets were a much better fit for them and just their background and everything. And the Steiner Brothers things, I mean, they're just straight out of the 80s. There's throwback, and then there's, I don't know.
I think they're still trying to figure the marketing out on those guys, so I wouldn't assume necessarily that this is what they're going to be for good. But I do feel like they're going to be one of the main cornerstones of NXT over the next year or so. Yeah. The fans are mental about them, which is nice. It's nice to see the fans get mental about guys that are fantastic in the ring and that aren't just all big talkers. I mean, I love it when a guy can do both. But I love the fact that the charisma that they have translates into their ring work, and that's what the fans are mostly into.
Yeah, like they have like their little funny promos and everything, and I find them super entertaining. But what I loved this week on the show was that they did that video package, and there was nothing comedy about it. It was like real talk about these guys and their backgrounds, and they sort of shared this commonality of that, they were able to get really far in their amateur careers, particularly Chad Gable was Olympian, but when it all came down to it, they came up short. And so they know what it's like to come up short in the big moments, and they don't want to do that at TakeOver. So, I mean, this is going to be a killer card. There's no way this is not going to be the show of the entire weekend, I would say.
I would agree with you that in every way that WrestleMania is not working, NXT TakeOver is. So I think there's going to be a real contrast between those two, where in NXT everything's just clicking and you've just got all your big guys in big matches. And I'm assuming it's the official send-off for Sami Zayn. Apparently they've done a little sort of send off for him at the house shows, but I'm assuming that this will be the official goodbye for Sami as he moves up to the main roster, and good for him and good for Nakamura, who I'm just freaking out about. I cannot wait to see that match.
The Sami Zayn thing worries me. I'll be honest with you.
Really?
Yeah. I've not been particularly blown away by the handling of him and the way they brought him up to the main roster. The Kevin Owens thing's cool. And then again, I think that's going to be a bigger story down the line, and I certainly hope that at some point he gets to win that belt and they really do like a real program with those guys. But so far, the way they've brought him up and the matches he's had hasn't felt very special. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I agree. But then again, I think we liken him mostly to Daniel Bryan, and Daniel Bryan, his original ascent was not that either. It was really the fans, and I do think the fans are going to get behind Sami. Oh, yeah. And I think he's going to become a force, that the office will have to reckon with. If the fans really do get behind him, they're going to have to decide if they're going to repeat the mistakes of the past or if they're going to support him. So
I thought too, like his talent, I mean, is just incredible, not just in the ring. And not just even on the mic, but just like the whole stuff with Nakamura when they did the very first video of him and it interrupted. Regal came out and then the video showed, which actually he was still in New Japan when they filmed that. He hadn't even been out of his contract yet, but he just filmed that and sent it to them. So that was something that was done like weeks and weeks ago. But the way that Sami reacted to that, it's so hard if I were to tell somebody, go out there, and you're going to see this guy come up on the screen, and that's going to be your opponent. And afterwards, we want your emotion and your reaction to be a little bit of honored and a little bit of, shit, I might be in trouble. And then the guy can go out there and deliver exactly what you asked for. I mean, that was his exact reaction. He was completely honored to be in this match and that they had considered him to be Nakamura's first opponent, but then he also had that look of, this might be a rough one, Yeah. He's so talented like that when it comes to the reactions, when it comes to sucking the people in. And like you say, the Daniel Bryan thing, Daniel Bryan started at the bottom too in WWE, and they tried to keep him there. But with Sami Zayn, yeah, I think you'll see something very similar. I don't think there's going to be anybody that gets over the way Daniel Bryan did for quite some time. I don't think that that's coming anytime soon. But if there is a guy, like I said, Sami Zayn is your guy.
I think Sami Zayn is going to take the void that was left by Daniel Bryan. I don't think he's going to fill his shoes, but I think Sami Zayn's going to take that void and those fans that are craving that, a bit more of what Daniel Bryan had to offer, and I think they are going to back Sami Zayn. So let's see where it goes. I mean, as you said, he's an incredible performer on every level, and you really can't find, even at this point, a guy who elicits more sympathy from a crowd than Sami. I mean, he connects, and when you've done that, half your work is done. So good for him. Good for him. We've been talking about all the things that that we're kind of a little bit not so into for Mania. And, I'm kind of wondering, when we're looking back at past Manias, what were the things that really worked that we're missing now? What are some of your favorite Mania builds that you can remember?
Mania builds, obviously Mania 3 and Savage and Steamboat and that whole story, because that was like a long-term story.
That was when they had the luxury to do that too, and I wish they could find a way to do that again. Build something over like 6 months. Build something over. When did they start building?
I was going to say, I think that build was about 6 months.
Yeah.
And even Steamboat was doing his public appearances at that time when he was off, and he was selling the gimmick. Like, I think Chris Jericho has told the story of meeting Ricky Steamboat as a kid during that time at like a meet and greet type thing. And he was at the time when he was off TV, so he was actually selling that he couldn't talk when he was doing all the appearances. And just the way that whole thing went down, and then to have, Steamboat come out on the end and in one of the greatest matches, not just in WrestleMania history, but one of the greatest matches in history that will live forever. Hogan and Andre, you can't deny the intrigue of that build. It was really an incredible story. Pat Patterson was the genius. Vince was the marketing genius, but Pat was the creative genius. And those are two of his greatest creations, those two, and they were both at the same WrestleMania. So you got to obviously reference WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 4 just holds a special spot in my heart. Sometimes I think we think back on that, and it's like that was one of the best WrestleManias ever. And it really wasn't. It really wasn't. You got to see Randy Savage in 4 matches, and that was awesome. And the last match was very good. But for the most part, you go back and you watch WrestleMania 4, it's not like it was this blow-away WrestleMania. It was just a cool concept of the very first time, especially like in WWE, where you had the world title, at stake in a big tournament. So, that obviously holds a really special spot in my heart. I was a huge Savage mark, as you were at that time. So that was one of those special moments that will always live forever. But as a build, that wasn't one that was like had some great build necessarily, although for the next year, that was one of the best builds they've ever done. And it was one of the actually highest grossing WrestleManias of all time. It was the highest grossing WrestleMania of all time at that time. And so Savage was one of Hogan's biggest opponents when it came to drawing power. And so when you think of WrestleMania 4 to WrestleMania 5, although it broke our hearts to see Hogan dethrone Savage, because it felt like Savage still had so much gas left in the tank as the top heel world champion, especially when you go back and watch some of that stuff from that time. Really, there's no way in hell that they couldn't have kept that belt on him and still drawn for another year, had Savage go over that year and then build to another whole year, a 2-year program where Hogan eventually did win, because Savage was on fire. He was drawing. Things were going great at that time when he had turned heel and Hogan was back on the road and everything. Go ahead.
It always felt like when Savage was white hot when he lost that title that they didn't quite know what to do afterwards with him.
No, they didn't.
He was too hot to kind of move down the card properly, and they didn't have anyone else at that level for him to fight. So it was quite some time before they found their footing with Randy. He seemed a little bit lost after he lost that match. But I agree with you; they could have done so much more, and the build for that. And the reason I think that it worked so well is it seemed so personal. They'd set those seeds, and you never were quite sure if, like, how much of it was really going on behind the scenes, how much of the animosity was really there. And I always found that matchup intriguing for that reason alone.
Oh, God, yeah. It was just beautiful. Everything about that storyline was beautiful in terms of a slow burn. And it never felt like, oh, God, okay, just go and do it. It just, at least at that time, it felt like every week you were just seeing a little bit more, a few dirty looks here and there. And it all just started, I think at the SummerSlam match, when Hogan kind of lifted up Elizabeth and she didn't even have pants on, for God's sakes. I don't blame him. I don't blame him for giving Hogan a look at that point. But, that was the very first sort of dirty look moment. And it was so subtle that you almost had to pause the VCR because, yes, we used to watch it on VCR. And you had to actually pause it to even catch the dirty look. But it was so subtle and so well done. And it all built to a really, again, a huge grossing WrestleMania the next year. So, yeah, you got to talk about that. I mean, we were in the Sky Dome for WrestleMania 6, and that heat for that main event, whether that's your cup of tea, whether it's not, first of all, it was cool that they broke from the tradition of a babyface versus a heel for the very first time at a WrestleMania, and you had the Intercontinental Champion and the World Champion. And as much as Warrior felt over in the building that night, and believe me, he did. That was like the most heat I've ever experienced live for anything, was that match. But we didn't think Warrior was winning the title. I don't even think we were even considering it. Were we?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I was hoping for it, and I was not a Warrior fan, but it was really just the lesser of two evils for me. So I was.
It was something different, right?
Yeah, it was something different, and it was like, well, God, at least it won't be Hogan for a while. And for me, yeah, I can remember there really wanting it to happen, but not thinking. And I didn't even believe it when the pin happened. There was that moment where you like freaked out and screamed, and I was like, no, wait a minute, they're gonna reverse it. Something's gonna happen. So I was shocked when it happened, but it was crazy. It was crazy. I'll legitimately say that.
Especially because every WrestleMania leading up to that was like the same, except for Savage, obviously, where he won and it was his moment, but Hogan was still right there. But I mean, everything else, it ended with a big boot and the leg drop. It was that same formula, and you could feel the end coming every time, and you just assumed that was always going to be the end, and that was always going to be the formula. Big boot, and then comes the leg drop, and that's the end of the match. And when he gave the big boot and he went for the leg drop, we all thought that was the end of the match, and Warrior rolled out of the way. No one had ever done that. And then before you know it, he hits the ropes, he hits the splash, 1, 2, 3. What just happened? I mean, it was absolute pandemonium.
Yeah.
You got to talk about WrestleMania 10. You got to talk about the Owen and Brett storyline.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was a culmination of. It was almost so beautiful because it was a culmination of all these different storylines that they all played into that sort of triple match main event. In that, you had the Owen Brett thing happening. You had Brett, trying to get his title back. You had the sort of rematch, the potential rematch of Luger and Yokozuna, which got derailed. So it was really, there were a lot of elements going into that to make it really intriguing. That was one where I was really intrigued as to what was going to happen going in.
Right, and you made Owen Hart in one night. By the time that opening match was over, Owen Hart was made. He was at a whole other level after beating Bret Hart clean in the middle in just an unbelievable match. I mean, that's still one of my favorite matches. That's one of my favorite matches of all time. It's like you can't find anything wrong with that match.
You know what the thing too about that is that it proved a point that I think they've not returned to enough, in that you can take a guy that needs to be over, put him over a guy who's bigger than him, who can really make him, and have the guy that lost still go on to be a huge, huge deal. Which happened in that very same night. I mean, Brett lost the opener, won the final. I don't think anyone looked at Brett as any less for having lost to Owen, but Owen seemed like a king, by the end of that.
Well, and Brett was so talented, when you look at Sami Zayn, like I was saying, how you can give him these instructions of, I want you to have a mix between these two emotions, and he's able to just go out there and do it. I mean, Brett's facials after Owen Hart got the 3. I mean, that's what really put that whole thing over. And it was like when you saw Brett's face, like you say, I mean, it wasn't anything like, oh, Brett is taking a step down or Brett's jobbing. It really just was like, that was he just happened to have his shoulders down for 3. He wasn't expecting that roll up. It came out of nowhere. And before Brett even could really comprehend what was happening, he just lost to his younger brother. I mean, it was all in the facials and all in Owen's celebration and everything, and it was just the perfect match with the perfect ending. And I always wish they were able to do a bit more with that story. I always thought there was more legs. I know Owen sort of got the title shot there following WrestleMania, but I always thought they could have done more to keep Owen at that level. But again, when you look at where he was before the Brett feud and where he was after, I mean, he certainly had taken a pretty big step up.
He had. And, if I can add my picks for this, I would say either of the Taker-Shawn builds were exciting and interesting.
Oh, yeah.
For me, they had there was a level of being personal again. There was that feeling of that anticipation, that feeling that Taker never lost, but that feeling that Shawn couldn't lose. I certainly, for the second one, I knew Shawn was getting ready to retire, so I knew pretty much where it was going. But for that first one, I mean, that was the kind of build they can't really do now because they just don't have guys at that level that can square off at that same equal level. So, that's one that sticks with me too.
Sure. No question about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any others? I'm trying to think.
No, I mean, those are my matches. Like, when you talk about my favorite matches in WrestleMania, and those matches, like I say, you can't find anything wrong with them if you tried. I mean, with a fine-tooth comb, you couldn't find a problem with any of those matches. When you're talking about Savage Steamboat, when you're talking about Bret and Owen, and when you're talking about that first Michaels versus Undertaker match. I mean, just 5 stars, perfect. Check mark. It just meant everything. It meant everything you would want in a wrestling match. So that's what I think about those. Those are my matches. You've pretty much touched on them.
I agree with you. The only thing on this card that even comes close as far as a build, and it's happened very, very late in the game. If they had more time, I think they could do more with it, is Brock and Dean. I think you've got a couple of characters there that are so combustible that I think if they would have started this a while ago and had it been a slow build, which they could have done very easily with Brock's limited schedule, I think you could be seeing a much more epic match at Mania. As it stands, I think they're doing a good job, and I'll give them kudos on that match build towards WrestleMania. But I mean, I can only imagine what they would have done if they started this before the Rumble.
Yeah, I mean, this week, and maybe last week too, but definitely this week, I felt like I would agree with you. But leading up to that, the weeks prior to that, Roadblock made no sense, first of all, because Dean Ambrose has already got a credibility issue here. He's a great wrestler. I love Dean Ambrose. This is nothing personal. He does have a credibility issue here going up against Brock Lesnar. I think everybody looks at that match and they think, well, there's no way Ambrose is going to beat Lesnar. There's just no way. They just can't visualize it in their minds. And then you have him a few weeks before this match with Brock Lesnar where nobody thinks he can win, losing to Triple H clean. And I just thought of anybody that could have been in that match at Roadblock, in that main event. Did you have to feed Dean Ambrose, who's already got this credibility issue, to Triple H? Now we've already seen he can lose clean to H. What's Brock going to do to him? And Dean may very well win that match, but I think most people are going into that just like, well, he doesn't stand a chance. So you're not exactly drawing people in for it. The people that see WrestleMania, sure, they'll be like excited that there's the upset of Dean winning, but I mean, when you're trying to sell something, I just thought it's been kind of a little bit suspect.
I agree with you. Yeah, that's exactly. Like I said, if they'd started this early enough and they would have had to have the time to really work at it, you could have had Dean doing just crazy run-ins, like a wasp that you can't quite swat,
right,
running in and hitting and taking Brock out over and over and over again. So not only do you have the credibility of Dean taking out Brock to some extent, but also the notion that Brock's not only getting angry and unfocused, but that he's getting worn down. I would have loved to have seen that. But of course they've done what they could with what they can, and I don't see it being an ongoing feud. Do you? Unless Dean wins, there could be an ongoing feud if Dean wins.
I have no idea really what's going to happen with this moving forward, and I certainly hope that Dean wins because otherwise you've just had Brock beat him up every week. Every time Dean comes out there to fight, he just gets his ass kicked, and he just gets treated like a child. And again, it's okay if you want to build him as the underdog. And I just think, like you say, they've had a bunch of weeks. They've known this match was going to happen for weeks before Roadblock, before anything. They knew they had decided on Dean versus Brock. There should at least have been that moment. I know there's one more Raw to come, and it's the go home. And let's hope that they at least do this a little bit on Monday. But you should have had something where Brock not only was taking him more seriously, but you actually saw fear in Brock's eyes for a moment because of the fact that this guy's completely psychotic and he may attack me with a chainsaw. I really hope on Monday's Raw we see something where Brock at least backs down from him or has that look in his eyes of, okay, this guy's a little nuts and this might be not quite as easy as I thought at WrestleMania. Because right now it seems like Brock's just going in there with zero fear. He's just ready to chew this guy up. And like I say, I mean, shit, Dean may win in the end, but I just think if you're trying to sell something, then they haven't really done a great job of giving Dean a lot of credibility. I've heard a shoot interview with Dean Ambrose, too, where he talked about the chainsaw that he used in CZW. There was a match, death match, where I forget who it was he was in the ring with. It might have been I forget the guy's name. Brain Damage, is that his name? He used like a chainsaw on Dean Ambrose's head. It was like one of the most gruesome sights you've ever seen. But Dean talked about that, and he said, it was like rubber edged. Like there was nothing sharp about that chainsaw at all. Dean was already bleeding and sweating, and it was just that was the blood, and that the chainsaw was 100%. I mean, it actually felt good on his head. It was like a massage. So I assume that they're going to use the same kind of thing. But how do you use that and incorporate that in a match where you can't have blood? Although Brock always seems to find a way to get blood, doesn't he?
He does, and I mean, I think that's maybe part of the appeal going in, that you're going to see a massacre. But yeah, I don't know. I agree. I mean, Dean's strength has always been that he's crazy, or that he at least comes across as crazy. If you talk to his girlfriend, she says he's quite a nice man, but he comes across as a crazy man. And you're right, they have not played that to the point, because that really should be the only thing that Brock Lesnar is scared of. I mean, there's nobody bigger than Brock Lesnar. Physically, you're not going to find someone who could bully Brock Lesnar.
Nobody's stronger.
Let's put it that way. I mean, Big Show might be taller, but nobody's going to be able to bully Brock Lesnar. But a crazy man who'll do crazy things. Yeah, I agree. Hopefully they will touch on that. And if they do it as an ongoing feud, I'd love to see them really play that. To the extent where Lesnar actually backs down a lot because he is afraid, and it's Dean doing the chasing. I would love that.
Well, and Dean's got that. That's what makes Dean unique on the WWE roster. He is the one guy that's got that dark background. And I really am quite happy that they're starting to at least put him in that light with a Terry Funk or a Cactus Jack, because he is the modern equivalent. And he's the one guy on the WWE roster. I can't think of anybody else that does have that experience in that ultra-violent style of wrestling. That is not my favorite style of wrestling, but it definitely makes him unique, and it makes him dangerous, and you can market that. It's just a matter of how do we market that in this sterile PG type of world, And so I'm just interested to see how they go about having what they're they're really positioning this as it's going to be a massacre, and Dean Ambrose is going to do anything, including use a chainsaw. It's a no-holds-barred match. The match is going to be incredible. Both of those guys have incredible matches. So I have no doubt in my mind Dean versus Brock will probably be WrestleMania match of the night this year, because it's just too good. You have too many amazing elements all at play there for it not to be. Do you know what I mean?
And it's fresh.
It's fresh.
They've been playing it out, but it really hasn't come down to getting down to business until Mania. So in that way, yeah, it's going to be super fresh, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm using the word super a bit much. Super fly, super fresh. It's all those things. But I am.
Super's next week and the week after. Super show. Sean Cunningham will be back. And we're going to be doing our predictions for WrestleMania. We're going to talk about the Go Home Raw. And we're going to talk about all kinds of other fun things happening in the world of wrestling. Who knows what can happen on WrestleMania week. We'll be obviously previewing the NXT show, because we're pretty damn excited about that, if you couldn't already tell. And one other thing on the WWE tip before I just tell you a little story about a gentleman a lot of you will know by the name of Kota Ibushi. But before we get to that, I said last week, we had Ernest Matthews on here, and I informed you, Shan, because you hadn't been on the air for a couple weeks, that all talk of Roman Reigns heel turns has been banned from war programming. Ernest Matthews didn't know that. We still had to fine him $150,000. It's probably going to go to bankruptcy court, but that's okay. But I just want to say, read into this what you will. I can't ban the Roman Reigns heel turn talk anymore because of things that I've been hearing. Now, I will expand on that next week. Hopefully I'll know a lot more about it. So stay tuned for Super Show next week as we find out more on the ongoing saga of Roman Reigns. But we're going to wrap this show up before we do. There's been a lot of speculation regarding one gentleman by the name of Kota Ibushi. Many of you that watched Wrestle Kingdom 9 on North American pay-per-view last year will remember that incredible match that he had with Shinsuke Nakamura that I immediately said is my match of the year, and nothing did come close to it in my opinion. That was my match of 2015. And one of my favorite guys to watch. However, he did suffer a pretty serious neck injury a few months back, and his career and his future was looking to be somewhat in question. However, Kota Ibushi had a press conference a few weeks ago where he talked about the fact that when he had his time off, because he has a dual contract with both New Japan and DDT Wrestling, and he talked about his time off and that he came to a realization that he was burning himself out with doing these two contracts and working for these two promotions. He was acknowledging that his body was not going to be able to keep up with that schedule anymore. And I think a lot of people were thinking, okay, well, is it going to be New Japan? Is it going to be DDT? Which one is he going to commit to? Kota Ibushi said he will commit to neither. He is now a freelancer working for himself. He is opening up his own promotion. Shan, have you heard the name of his promotion?
I have not heard the name of his promotion. What is it?
It is the Kota Ibushi Pro Wrestling Research Institute. So okay. Kota Ibushi is opening the Kota Ibushi Pro Wrestling Research Institute, and he's going to do things on his own terms. He did return to action for the first time this past week. Kota Ibushi is booked WrestleMania weekend for Evolve, which is Gabe Sapolsky's promotion, and is pretty much the official feeder system of the WWE. That's where a lot of the guys are coming from. That's where Gargano was coming from. That's where a lot of the talent is getting their looks right now. Tommaso Ciampa. And so Triple H has even been attending certain Evolve shows in person and watching and trying to scout some talent. So Kota Ibushi is going to be at the Evolve show during WrestleMania weekend, and one can only assume will be a part of the Global Cruiserweight Series. I did see his return match in DDT this past week, and there was a lot of questions about whether or not he would still be the same Kota Ibushi. He looked like the same Kota Ibushi to me. He looked incredible, and he did give a man a pile driver into a toilet.
Okay, we need to get a clip of that, if we can, up on the website, because that's something that needs to be shared.
That's something you just don't see every day. Kota Ibushi Global Cruiserweight Series, the Kota Ibushi Pro Wrestling Research Institute, will be potentially representing in full force this July. So we'll keep you updated with that. I'm getting more and more excited by the day about that.
Good. I'm excited too, man. There are so many guys going into that could, if they might make their way up into NXT and on the main roster, could really be game changers. So super excited.
Put Rich Swann in that.
Put Rich Swann on that.
I want to see the dancing.
Speaking of dancing, speaking of super, I'm going to say it right now. This is just one of those bad ideas that come into my head, and I should think them through a little bit better. But I'm going to say right now, next week for Super Show, I'm going to do an a cappella version of Super Freak. I'm going to do it. So be ready. Be ready.
I'm excited for that. And I know everybody out there is as well. Shotgun Shan, he's a great dancer. He's a great singer, great entertainer, great tap dancer. So I'm expecting all of these things to be represented in full force next week for Super Show 12.
Are we up to 12?
We're up to 12.
Wow.
Funny thing is, we did a few of them where we were all together long before we even had this Super Show concept. So there were Super Shows 0 and -1 and -2 as well. Yeah. But nonetheless, officially this is going to be Super Show 12. And then the next week we'll be bringing you Super Show 13, where we will be covering WrestleMania. We'll be covering the NXT show with the debut of Shinsuke Nakamura and many, many other things that will be happening this week. Kota Ibushi coming to Evolve WrestleMania weekend. Wow, that's pretty exciting. They wanted him a long time ago, and he was supposed to be one of the guys that came in right at the time of Balor and Kevin Owens. But he's got this research institute. I don't know if he's going to be able to commit full time. He said he's a freelancer, but still, we can still get him on NXT a few times, hopefully. So pretty damn excited, everybody. And just want to say, before we get out of here, rest in peace to the legendary Fife Dog of A Tribe Called Quest, who did pass away this past week. Complications. He's had a very public battle with diabetes that people have been very aware if you follow the career of A Tribe Called Quest and Fife Dog. So very unfortunate that Fife Dog passed away at the age of 45. Also another huge loss, the death of the legendary Gary Shandling.
Oh, I was so sad to hear that.
We used to watch that show back in the day. You really put me onto that when he still had the Gary Shandling show.
Oh, and best theme song ever. I mean, can we get that song? I think we need to play it.
Yes, let's go out on the Gary Shandling theme, and then maybe next week when we do Super Show, we can play a bit of Tribe Called Quest, and we'll continue to mourn the loss of those two great talents, two legends in their own respective fields. So rest in peace, Fife. Rest in peace, Gary Shandling. Myself, Shotgun Shan, will be back next week for Super Show 12. See ya! See ya!
The theme to Gary Show, the theme to Gary Show. Gary called me up and asked if I would write his theme song. I'm almost halfway finished. How do you like it so far? How do you like the theme to Gary Show? voice you hear as you watch the credits. We're almost to the part of where I start to whistle. Then we'll watch It's Gary Shandling Show. This was the theme to Gary Shandling Show.